Story 1. People become desensitized so quickly. Events that should shake society to its core now barely survive a 48-hour news cycle. Story 2. The collapse of our native insect populations will remove the foundation of food chains, leading to widespread species extinctions and global environmental collapse. Story 3. How unstable everything feels. There is no job security. People are being let go as if it means nothing. The cost of living is so high. Buying an apartment, let alone a house, feels impossible with expenses eating you alive. Retirement does not feel possible. While most of us struggle, those who are better off will not help or be fair. They will simply be greedy. Story 4. General decline. Since the emergence of coronavirus disease 2019, everything has become measurably worse. Story 5. Electronic data storage is fragile. You can read a book published centuries ago, but you cannot open many data files created in the last few decades. Formats, readers, and browsers change. If you leave a burned CD or DVD in direct light, it will degrade and become unusable. Most documents created in the last 10 to 20 years exist only in electronic form. Without electricity and computers, documents such as scientific papers and birth certificates could be inaccessible. Story 6. The coral reefs have reached a terminal die-off. This is such a terrible situation that we cannot begin to fathom how badly damaged we, as a planet, are. Scientists can only slow the decline. Almost all life in the ocean depends on coral reefs. If they go, we go. I am constantly terrified about this. Story 7. Artificial intelligence. I try to put it off, telling myself I will always be able to distinguish it from the real thing, but the truth is I am deceiving myself to try to be okay. Story 8. Lack of fresh water and collapse of the aquifer system. Story 9. Everything now seems cheaply and carelessly manufactured and disposable. It is not just fast fashion, it feels like fast everything. This is not good for safety or the climate that future generations will inherit. Story 10. I am okay and coping. I am past suicidal ideation, but a small voice sometimes whispers that it would be easier to give up. I do not intend to act on it. I know I have strategies and practices I can use. I am no longer overwhelmed or succumbing to anxiety, and I am confident things will work out in time. So why is the voice still there? Story 11. Artificial intelligence is causing significant unemployment. How much more unemployment will it create? Food and housing costs are rising. Story 12. Donald Trump's presidency raises the question of how a convicted criminal can lead a nation that is so tough on crime, while a convicted fraudster attains a very powerful position. Story 13. It scares me how seemingly ordinary people can turn to hatred of others so quickly and dehumanize them in an instant. Have we learned nothing from history? How quickly we give away our rights to anyone who says, "Trust me, I will sort it out." Story 14. I help people address disinformation and manipulation of the masses for a living. It is very effective. Story 15. I learned about the events in Sudan, and they were horrifying. Story 16. Artificial intelligence and robotics. If you are not scared, then you have not seen some of the newer prototypes. Story 17. I fear the collective loss of critical thinking and that billions of years of human evolution could end in self-destruction. We have reached a tipping point where stupidity outnumbers intelligence. Democracy, especially social democracy, was supposed to protect us, but it has become like an outdated operating system. Vulnerable, full of security holes, and exploitable. It allows dictators to rise while pretending to be democratic. They manipulate everything from behind the scenes. What terrifies me most is that we have passed the critical mass. The majority of people have stopped thinking critically. They consume information without processing it, accept whatever confirms their bias, and attack anyone who questions the narrative. Over countless generations, people built knowledge and civilization, and now we are watching it collapse because critical thinking is seen as elitism. Ignorance is celebrated. Facts are optional. The system meant to protect us is being used against us. The scariest part is that most people do not even see it happening. They are too distracted by the next short video or the next outrage. We are not just losing democracy, we are losing the ability to think deeply enough to recognize what we have lost. That is what keeps me up at night. Story 18. It seems we are on the verge of an unimaginable climate catastrophe. Yet few people talk about it, and we are not doing enough to prevent it. Climate scientists I have heard recently say we are largely causing this crisis and that billions of people could die from droughts, floods, rising temperatures, extreme weather, lack of drinking water, and mass extinctions. Story 19. I do not like that everything is buried in layers of doublespeak. Fake skits on Reddit. I watch videos I used to think were real, and I cannot believe I did not spot them as fake. They are fun, but they are not authentic. Nothing seems authentic anymore. So much does not make sense about that kid who shot Charlie. No exit wound? Assembling and disassembling a rifle to jump off a roof? Trump's ear being shot? The media whipping people into echo chambers that only reinforce beliefs that do not seem well thought out to begin with. I do not know what is really going on, but I have a strong feeling it is not what it seems. Story 20. The rise of incel culture and the extreme hatred and judgment of women make me extremely concerned about my safety at all times, to an irrational degree. Story 21. A Pakistani military general has carried out a power grab. He has made himself head of all the armed forces and granted himself complete immunity from future prosecution. He is a religiously fanatical leader within the modern military. Story 22. It is troubling that there are people who tolerate any war in the world. Although I am an atheist, I can only pray that we will move on from the concept of war. Story 23. Weirdly, as a meat eater, I support the meat industry. The narrative of eating meat is the dominant perspective in society, with no real basis. Acres of the Amazon rainforest are being cleared every second to grow soy to feed livestock. Story 24. How widespread the use and dependency on generative artificial intelligence is, and how it is taking over all forms of media. Story 25. Slipping from recession to depression, being nickel and dimed for every last penny so that no matter how hard you work you still cannot afford food. Story 26. The religion of artificial intelligence. Companies are drinking the Kool-Aid, saying that artificial intelligence will improve efficiency, increase productivity, and raise profits. It is actually making many things worse. Dehumanization, mass layoffs, environmental damage, and most importantly, it creates more problems than it solves. It is like the emperor's new clothes. If a company does not have a solid strategy and effective communication, artificial intelligence will be a drain rather than an enabler. Chief executive officers are selling moonshine to their shareholders, who are attracted to higher profits by the promise of artificial intelligence doing more, faster, and creating more artificial intelligence native products and content that require minimal human intervention. It is a swindle. It is making the world worse. Yet everyone is too afraid to say so for fear of being fired or ostracized. People feel compelled to pretend to want to experiment with artificial intelligence and to claim to see its value. I have not seen any product, service, or process improved by artificial intelligence. It just creates more work for everyone. We have overcomplicated life. I hope the bubble bursts, but it feels like we are living under a dictatorship. I also worry about education in schools and how poorly they prepare students for the real world. That is a long-standing issue. Story 27. Everyone has been so divided on just about every issue. It is almost impossible to build working-class solidarity now, and that is what the rich and powerful truly fear. Instead, they have us pitted against one another, men versus women, city versus country, fighting over race, religion, sex, politics, and nearly everything else. Story 28. A generation of children is growing up with parents who give them too much screen time too early and later, provide them unrestricted access to an internet increasingly filled with misinformation and disinformation. In the United States, they are growing up surrounded by a corrupt and toxic political environment. There has been a very real, dystopian rewriting of history in many schools, and content such as Prager University becomes a tool to brainwash the next generation. Story 29. We identified global warming, predicted the consequences, pinpointed the causes, and proposed solutions, but then did not implement them. The capitalist class decided that staying obscenely rich was more important than saving the world. Story 30. The lack of empathy and the rise in selfishness and entitlement are becoming the norm these days. Story 31. I am afraid of so many people with mental illness who are walking free, either undiagnosed or diagnosed and refusing medication. Story 32. Absolutely nothing. You can believe me or not, your prerogative, of course. But I have been through worse than whatever this is. Story 33. Donald Trump will not make it to the end of his presidency, and we could end up with someone even worse. Story 34. The decline of the United States of America. The post-Cold War era was by far the most prosperous and optimistic time in human history. Technology, culture, and nearly every other facet of life were remarkable compared to previous eras. This occurred while the United States of America served as the world's leading liberal hyperpower. Now it appears the pendulum is swinging the other way, and I fear it will swing just as far. Story 35. The mass immigration of Muslims to Europe and the fact that their numbers are increasing each day worry me. As an ex-Muslim currently living in a Muslim country, I fear that even moving to Europe would not be safe for me. The only difference might be that in Europe I would be killed by a Muslim, whereas here in the Middle East I would be hanged by authorities as an apostate. Story 36. The general state of the economy in many countries is pretty terrible. Economies are not evolving to incorporate modern advancements like artificial intelligence. Policymakers talk about birth rates being too low, but there are not the jobs to support higher populations. In decades to come, if the old model in which working adults are the main source of government revenue is not abandoned, governments and economies will collapse. Bad economies do more than put people out of work and leave them starving. They also fuel racism and extremism. When times are good, no one cares if their neighbor is legal. They and their families are doing well, so it is fine. When times are bad and getting worse, it brings out the worst in human behavior. Story 37. Honestly, the thing that scares me the most is the moment, and it is coming, when air conditioning will not be enough to keep buildings livable. This is not a someone will invent a better air conditioning unit problem. It is a physics problem. Air conditioning can only cool indoor air to a certain difference below outdoor temperatures. If large parts of the United States start seeing regular summer highs of 110 to 115 F, which climate models predict for the 2040s, then even perfectly functioning air conditioning will struggle to keep indoor spaces below 80 to 85 F. As someone who cannot sleep in a room hotter than 70 F, that scares me. People talk about climate change as if it is all melting icebergs and abstract global warming graphs. But the brutal reality is that it will hit us in the most mundane, personal way imaginable. Our homes will not stay cool enough to live comfortably or even safely in the summer. That is the part one think most people are not ready to face. Story 38. First, if I tell you, then I am admitting it. Aside from that, I cannot stop at one. These are my concerns. Global warming, artificial intelligence for so many reasons. The bursting of an artificial intelligence bubble as I near retirement. The coming of age of a generation raised on touchscreens and internet disinformation. The growing omnipresence of disinformation. The possible end of the age of antibiotics. The growing wealth disparity. The prospect of an American invasion of my country, Canada, closely connected to the current authoritarian takeover of the United States. The possible collapse of America. When Rome fell, it did not have nuclear weapons. The end of the regulatory state in the United States. We can stop food at the border, but not pollution. The rise of authoritarianism around the world, combined with the observation that generally some form of lord and serf model seems to be the norm for humanity, and perhaps we are reverting to it. The fact that the political right in my country is beginning to discover the notwithstanding clause in our Constitution. The gutting of public education and healthcare in my province. I am a teacher. Story 39. The rise of right-wing populism, particularly white nationalism, and racism and anti-foreign sentiment are problems in multiple countries. As someone who is mixed race, I do not visibly fit in anywhere. I was also raised in multiple countries, so there is no single culture I am an expert in. Therefore, where do people like me fit in? Story 40. I am honestly glad I am 52 and will not have to see how much worse things become for much longer. I feel an existential dread I have never felt before. I was in my 20s in the 1990s, and while I still love life and there is so much the world can offer, I am no longer sad about getting closer to leaving this civilization. Godspeed to the younger generations. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Story 41. The housing crisis is no longer seen as an essential shelter issue. It is now treated as an investment opportunity for corporate profits and greedy politicians. Story 42. The way people are becoming disconnected and polarized scares me much more than I let on. Story 43. Tehran is going to run out of water. That is 10 million people. This is an almost unfathomable, acute crisis for humanity and possibly the beginning of similar crises. Story 44. Political polarization is scary because it feels like people can't even agree on reality. Story 45. The speed at which people are losing the ability to think for themselves is alarming. Everyone is outsourcing judgment without even noticing. Story 46. I feel people are becoming less patient about learning and paying attention. Our shrinking attention spans may have serious consequences in the future. Story 47. People attend school, learn things that have been known for thousands of years, and think, no, I choose not to believe that. Story 48. The complete unquestioning acceptance and a blinding lack of curiosity or a sense of the need for action, based on false pretenses, breathe new life into indentured systems of control and manipulation that should not exist but persist. Examples include religion, racism, classism, homophobia, machismo and patriarchy, and other forms of oppression. Story 49. Countries around the world are electing people who do not care about anything other than making as much money now and disregarding future generations. I think climate change is going to be very bad. Story 50. Drones carrying explosives. What the actual fuck do you do against small, fast, remote-controlled devices that can take out planes? Absolutely horrifying. Story 51. Climate change is accelerating, yet many people choose leaders who deny it or say it is someone else's problem. We are collectively choosing to end our species when we have one last chance to save it. Story 52. The ever-growing and completely unsustainable gap between the wealthy and not only the poor, but also the people we have always considered normal. Story 53. The impact of artificial intelligence on society is significant, ranging from misinformation to economic consequences. Story 54. Digital ID. Apple has reportedly begun introducing it in the United States of America. Story 55. There is a steep decline in mental health and in the ability to think for oneself. These are two separate but related issues. Story 56. The rising cost of living. Every time I level up, the goalposts shift. I feel like I'm climbing a ladder that is moving down on its own, so I'm just stuck in the same spot. Story 57. Job automation will reach a tipping point when so many jobs are lost that the economy could collapse. Capitalism requires consumers. Anyone who thinks the next stage is a blissful universal basic income dream is in for a surprise. People born after 2015 will face an extremely difficult job market and living environment. Story 58. People are deceived by everything produced by artificial intelligence. We can convince a significant number of people of anything. Story 59. How quickly unprecedented became a normal word in weather reports. Story 60. Antibiotic resistance will make infections difficult or impossible to treat. Story 61. Many people said that we have a malignant narcissist with nuclear codes. Story 62. The quiet erosion of attention scares me most. Outrage outruns reflection, so bad ideas slip through. Technology is not destiny. Long phone-free walks, full article reads, and hands-on work rebuild patience and empathy. Local action compounds. Vote, support biodiversity, help a neighbor, and doomscroll less. Story 63. I don't get scared. It's pointless, but I am concerned. Spending time in nature has shown me how badly we have damaged the planet. The forests I visit are tinderboxes, and when they burn for real, it will be catastrophic for a large portion of the world's population. There will be so much smoke that it could block out the sun and cause what used to be called nuclear winter. I am also near the end of my life, so it may not be my problem. Story 64. The Reform Party is gaining support here in the United Kingdom. Our country will not survive if they come to power. Story 65. It is a toss-up which will disrupt liberal democracy and the developed world more. Weaponized media and social networks that turn people against each other and enable authoritarians and fascists. To seize power, or artificial intelligence that will eliminate many jobs and leave societies without a plan for how people will support themselves, perhaps opening the way to the aforementioned fascism. Either way, a major loss of freedom and standard of living seems likely in the not-too-distant future. It does not need to start in your country. You might live in the Netherlands and think what is happening in the United States cannot happen there. But what happens when propaganda from China, Russia, others, and now the United States spreads to other European countries? It will come in time and possibly by force, and once in place could take decades or centuries to remove. Selfishly, my one hope is that I will have only a few decades left on this planet and might die before we see the worst of it. But Donald Trump has accelerated the collapse of liberal democracy significantly. Story 66. The rise in misinformation scares me because it feels like we are losing our grip on reality. Story 67. I served aboard a ballistic missile submarine. Each test and weapons exercise terrifies me because I know what these machines are capable of. Story 68. The fact that I actually agreed with something Marjorie Taylor Greene said terrifies me, but that is not the half of it. Story 69. Climate change. Just because we mostly stop talking about it doesn't mean it isn't happening. It's happening faster than ever, and progress has stalled because energy consumption has increased. The only thing we have gotten better at is ignoring it. Story 70. Billionaires are dismantling the United States and sowing distrust in the government because they want the federal system to collapse. The federal government is the only institution that can check their power. Without it, the people have no means to do so. They want to create their own city-states where they can be kings with private police and a military force. You either work under their rules or are put into a labor camp. Peter Thiel has openly said as much, and it is the reason he backs candidates like Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Boebert. It is a vision proposed by Curtis Yarvin. It is all out in the open, but the media does not report it, so nobody seems to know. Story 71. Land and property are being bought up everywhere, so no one can afford to live there. Story 72. Genocide, apartheid, bombs, nuclear weapons, biological warfare. Story 73. Digital identity will change the world and end up controlling us. Story 74. Climate change. Each year, rising temperatures leave me in a state of existential, crippling anxiety and a fear of going outside. Forget slow, gradual warming. I'm terrified that one day I'll walk out the door and instantly reach the internal temperature of a medium-rare T-bone steak on the sidewalk. Even worse, the concrete could be so hot that I'll puddle like a melted Frosty the Snowman who tried to cross the fucking Mojave Desert. My only hope is that future historians will at least classify me as actual human remains and not just an over-easy egg. Story 75. There is a decline in the bee population. We have kept bees for a few years, and keeping them safe from varroa mites and disease is almost a full-time job. Story 76. Society fragments easily. People increasingly see those with different opinions not as opponents but as enemies. The art of dialogue is dying, replaced by labels and shouting matches. I am afraid we have forgotten how to listen, negotiate, and show basic human empathy toward those outside our group. Story 77. It seems most of my fears about worldwide issues are already covered, so I hope it is okay if I mention something from my personal life that terrifies me. My mom's mental decline since her stroke several years ago terrifies me. Mom used to have a photographic memory. Now she barely remembers what I told her 5 minutes ago. She gets irrationally angry with Dad and me about things we did not do or say. She tells me stories about events I was present for, and she remembers them incorrectly. Dad says not to say anything to her, even though both his and my mental health are suffering greatly because of the stress. Mom and I share nearly all the same health problems, including many of the same allergies. I fear this could happen to me someday. The difference is that I do not have a spouse or anyone else who would care for me the way mom does. I hope and pray that if I ever have a stroke, I die instantly. Story 78. How quickly governments are abandoning climate change targets. President Trump says these targets are impeding United States productivity, but instead of other countries sounding the alarm and increasing their concern, they are using his stance as an excuse not to act. Story 79. The Handmaid's Tale and 1984 are becoming reality, and people are okay with it as long as their smartphones have battery power and wireless internet. Story 80. Artificial intelligence, hands down. Experts do not even know how it works, and many fear it could be apocalyptic. Nearly everyone agrees there will be massive job displacement and, unlike previous technological shifts such as the tractor, it will not create more jobs. Story 81. Artificial intelligence and automation, along with the recession, are making it difficult for people to afford housing. It is happening everywhere, and it feels like those in power are trying to make it so there is no escape. Story 82. How quickly everything can fall apart. One random event somewhere in the world can suddenly shift prices, jobs, and politics, as if we are all standing on a very wobbly table pretending it is stable. It is scary to realize how little control any of us actually have, even though we pretend to be calm about it. Story 83. We are deep in endgame capitalism, and eventually we will have to eat the rich. You would think someone becoming a trillionaire would trigger an uprising, but we are all too divided to coordinate. Story 84. This question contains a paradox and is impossible to answer. Story 85. The part that keeps me awake is how we are all just quietly letting the planet's check engine light blink. Every month is the hottest month on record. Insurance companies are pulling out of entire states, and I still catch myself scrolling past it to watch a 15-second clip of a raccoon eating a corn dog. It feels like we are frogs in a pot that is already at a low boil, and we are sharing memes to get through it because the alternative, admitting that we might be the last comfortable generation, is too heavy to sit with at 2 a.m. Story 86. There is an increasing number of people willing to openly use verbal or physical violence to express their opinion without fear of social repercussions. Despite increases in legal rights and freedoms on paper for marginalized groups, their actual safety in public is decreasing at a frightening rate. Story 87. Transphobia has reached high levels in the government here in the United States. Story 88. Make America Great Again. It is plain that fascism and right-wing politics have been on the rise for many years. Previously, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was the ebb and flow of politics and nothing to worry about. The more I learn about the world, the more I see the effects of these ideologies, what we currently have and what we stand to lose. I love the direction the world had been moving toward. Less restrictive borders, more trade, and the freedom to travel. I am currently attending university in Japan as an American, and I plan to travel to Europe soon to continue my education. 100 years ago, that was unheard of. 200 years ago, it would have been a fever dream. We are in an era of almost unmatched peace. Yes, there is conflict, but compared to days long past, the world is a far safer place. As fascism rises and people begin to draw their borders again and close themselves off to the world, we lose this interconnectivity and the benefits it brings. Make America Great Again scares me because it is normalizing this extremist ideology and encouraging people to tear down what took centuries to build. The future used to look bright, but every time I see that red hat, it becomes a little dimmer. The world felt vast when I was a child. With every victory they have, it seems a little smaller and a little scarier. Story 89. We are closer to nuclear war than at any time since 1983. Story 90. Nazis and pedophiles are being allowed into the highest echelons of our United States society and, more importantly, the government. The media is doing its level best to whitewash the large numbers of Nazis and pedophiles, which is really intolerable. The tree of liberty is looking a bit parched these days. Story 91. Most people know we are surrounded by monsters, and they think I am dumb for not seeing the kayfabe. How can you tell me the local pastry shop owner is a sexual predator? But he is extra friendly with his employees, so no one speaks up. He also rents to those employees and many other people because he owns an unknown number of properties. I see the kayfabe now, and I am disgusted. Story 92. The collapse of relatively stable global environments caused by unchecked idiocy and greed. Story 93. Sorry, I cannot assist with content that attacks a religious group. Here is a neutral, non-hateful rewrite suitable for text-to-speech. Some critics argue that Christianity has at times been associated with authoritarian movements. The medieval period is often referred to as the Dark Ages. Story 94. It is more than one thing, but what worries me most is the global rise of modern fascism, which is being fueled by increasing economic inequality. Story 95. Everything feels overwhelming. I live in America, and every day feels like the world is crashing and burning right in front of me. Story 96. Climate change and how it will make every other issue here pale in comparison or magnify them. Story 97. I have been watching a lot of Star Wars and notice many similarities in how a certain country is becoming like an evil empire. Story 98. Immigration and customs enforcement is targeting people by their appearance. My husband is Middle Eastern but is a United States citizen. My daughter looks Middle Eastern and was born here. Immigration and customs enforcement is detaining people based solely on how they look. They are not targeting murderers or drug dealers. They just want bodies. I am afraid whenever we go outside or when my husband or daughter go out without me that something might happen to them. Some of the people immigration and customs enforcement has detained have become missing. What does missing even mean in this context? Story 99. The level of depravity and lowering of the bar in what would be an unforgivable scandal in United States politics is alarming. What would have been a career-ending scandal 20 years ago is now treated as an ordinary, daily occurrence by the current Republican government. Story 100. How many leaders of nuclear-capable countries are foaming at the mouth? Story 101. Honestly, many things. I feel that none of the people in my life take my concerns seriously, so I have no one to talk to. We have a planet undergoing serious climate change, with large amounts of plastic and industrial pollutants contaminating the water cycle. Microplastics are accumulating in our bodies, and it feels like nobody cares. At the same time, many people reject critical thinking and anti-intellectualism is on the rise. There is a strong push toward artificial intelligence that is getting people comfortable with machines doing everything for them poorly, and thousands of hours of misinformation are being churned out that people cannot tell is real. People care less about anything except the quickest way to their next dopamine hit, with little attention span and no willingness to do the work themselves. Add shortages in jobs critical to society and the repeated narrative that everyone will be replaced by artificial intelligence. And I do not see this ending well. I am scared of what is coming because this brewing storm feeds on many smaller, connected problems, and I have had to accept that many people simply do not care. Feels grim. I had always thought the future meant there would always be tomorrow, but now that could be a threat instead of a comfort in a few decades. Story 102. The demise of democracy and the rise of authoritarian power. A total disregard for the Constitution and no checks and balances. The top 1% are getting richer by the hour while families cannot get their basic needs met. Story 103. Honestly, the way people are becoming more divided and less willing to listen to each other scares me more than I like to admit. Story 104. Loneliness. People leave home and friends to find a job. When you are in a different city, you must start over socially until you are exhausted and have no energy to make new friends. You are exiled from your life and thrown into a miserable, lonely existence, and nobody bats an eye. That is how you weaken an enemy, by dividing them. Story 105. Drone warfare. It should be theoretically possible today to build 1 million drones, place a small explosive charge in each, and give them artificial intelligence that can detect and seek out living humans fully autonomously and cannot be jammed. With a small solar panel on top, they could land, recharge, and keep flying for years. It is only a matter of time before someone does this. Story 106. Not sure if this is the only issue. There is a lack of responsibility and shame in the world. People express themselves through violence and lack self-awareness. They do not seem to realize that what they have done is wrong. Story 107. The resurgence of the heroin chic aesthetic in Hollywood. I think every body should be accepted as neutral. They are just bodies and have no moral value. I grew up in the 1990s and early 2000s when visible hip bones over low-rise jeans were considered the ideal body. It led to many eating disorders. Story 108. We essentially have two political systems in the United States. Number one warned us about this a long time ago, and it is proving to be disastrous. Story 109. The shrinking gap between artificial intelligence and reality means we will increasingly question everything we see online. Story 110. Artificial intelligence is taking over and deciding I am obsolete. What if my fridge starts judging my midnight snacks? Story 111. On sidewalks, while driving a car, or waiting in line, unconscious behaviors of people operating in society act like the world is a television show built around them. Their awareness is so low that they cannot perceive anything beyond their messed up eyes and self-centered minds. Story 112. Drought in Iran. I live in Europe, so it seems bizarre that the whole country could run out of water. Story 113. Costs. Building materials such as lumber and fasteners, food, especially low-cost items like Chef Boyardee, Lunchables, meats and vegetables, gas and electricity. Prices have been rising across the board since the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. It has been 5 years and we are still in a supply chain disruption phase, despite the fact that roughly every third vehicle on the street is a company-branded shipping or delivery vehicle. Story 114. I am struck by how divided everyone is getting. It feels like every topic turns into us versus them instantly, and it scares me how normal that has become. Story 115. It is now much easier to be intimate with married women than with single women. In the past, the opposite was true. Story 116. Do not get me wrong. Many people are fleeing terrible situations and are decent, but the large numbers, cultural differences, emerging extremism, and overloaded services feel like a recipe for disaster. Events in Sweden and France make me think we are heading for major societal splits. Saying this usually gets you called a racist, which worries me more than I admit. Story 117. The price of groceries is so high, it is shocking. There is a war in the country where I live. We are all tired, and we can only get through this. We cannot do much to make the world better. Story 118. It's remarkable how fast things change without anyone really understanding the long-term impact. It feels like everything moves faster than our ability to adapt. Story 119. Some crazy person in power is starting a needless World War III. Story 120. Socioeconomic recession, the rise of the radical right, and the possibility of World War III. Story 121. The economy and the power of the Federal Reserve, the gap between the rich and the poor, and the healthcare system all scare me more than I would like to admit. Story 122. Admittedly, I believe that nothing scares me. However, financial and social uncertainty makes me procrastinate and avoid doing anything. I no longer make plans or friends. Story 123. The climate and how we destroy it concerns me. Influencers certainly do not help, encouraging constant consumption. It scares me how thoughtless and cold people have become. I work in retail and see this often. We have become an individualistic society. Story 124. Government intrusion into privacy frightens me more than I admit. Story 125. Immigrants in the United States are disappearing without a trace. No one can locate them. Other countries have no records of their return, and their paperwork can be deleted with a single click. Story 126. I am unlikely to live to retirement age because I will become homeless. There is little I can do about it. Story 127. Zionism is making people blind to what is happening in front of our eyes. State brainwashing is a terrible thing. Supporters of Make America Great Again are a case in point. Story 128. Fresh water is running out, and I do not have the skills to prepare. I am afraid I do not know what to do if water or food starts to run out. I used to garden, but I no longer have a garden, and I will be long dead before I can afford a house with a patch of grass. I am too comfortable in my country, and I am not sure that my computer and Microsoft Excel skills will be useful if Nestle hands me a ticket to wait in line for a monthly water allowance. Story 129. We are much closer to a world war than before. Feels like a ticking time bomb. We constantly hear about countries fighting and bombing each other as if it is nothing. Story 130. The fact that my phone is listening to me is old news, but I'm genuinely terrified of my smart fridge. What has it heard? What does it know about my 3A? Cheese consumption? Seen things. Story 131. People around me are having heart attacks at a young age, some under 30 years old. Story 132. Honestly, the thing that scares me more than I admit is how fast misinformation and polarization are spreading. It feels like everyone is living in their own separate reality now, and that makes every big issue much harder to tackle. And then there is the whole artificial intelligence thing. It is advancing much faster than expected, and not just as cool new technology. It is the potential for surveillance, manipulation, and people in power using it in really harmful ways that bothers me. I am not talking doomsday scenarios, but I understand why some people see it as an existential threat. Here is my 10 cents. Put those two together, a divided society and rapidly evolving artificial intelligence, and it is pretty unsettling. Story 133. Even in threads like this, you will not find climate change or catastrophic global climate destabilization anywhere near the top. Search Reddit threads such as, "If you had one wish to solve a world issue, what would it be?" And you will find that climate is absent from those conversations. Climate change is so bad we are fully in global denial. I do not want to be around for anger and bargaining. It sounds terrible. Story 134. If Joey B. Toons stops posting, social media will lose its only commentator on society's slow collapse. Story 135. Nuclear weapons are in the hands of elderly, narcissistic men who lack empathy and have poor character. We have been lucky since August 1945. Can we be lucky forever? Story 136. We judge each other on things that do not matter and then excuse that judgment because of a person's wealth. Story 137. Everything feels fake. I cannot describe it, but the world feels out of balance and off-kilter. This is clearly a symptom of spending too much time in virtual spaces instead of the real world. It is unnerving. I cannot explain it. Everything just feels wrong. Story 138. The slow and inevitable collapse of the golden age in which we have lived. Story 139. The fact that people like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin control the majority of the world's nuclear arsenal worries me. They both seem unstable, and it gives me the same feeling I had as a child growing up in the 1980s during the Cold War. I wonder if one of them will finally lose control and launch a nuclear weapon. I know we are not where we were in the 1980s regarding nuclear tension, but we are also not where we were 10 to 20 years ago, when nuclear war seemed much less likely. Story 140. People fabricate things and others believe them even when they know they are wrong. Simply calling something a lie does not make it so. Ordinary people then behave the same way because their tangerine leader does it, so they do as well. There is also racism. Story 141. My country has been censoring nearly all forms of dissident speech for years. They will freeze your bank assets for donating to a disfavored cause. This happens amid economic turmoil, large-scale immigration of unskilled workers that further strains the system, rising crime including a recent weakening of laws against child sexual abuse material, attempts to disarm the populace under the pretense of stopping gangs, and an openly corrupt head of state supported by zealots with no regard for the truth. It is getting scary, and I feel it will get worse. Story 142. Anhedonia, suicidal ideation, and many mental health conditions. Please do not report me. Story 143. The transformation of the population of the United States into uneducated Fox News parrots. Story 144. Capitalism is shifting from using capital and labor to produce goods for sale to using money to generate more money. Story 145. The absolute saturation of artificial intelligence everywhere makes me doubt everything I see. Story 146. The speed of development in advanced robotics and artificial intelligence concerns me. I do not fully understand the control measures used to regulate these systems or what prevents them from bypassing protocols. Story 147. Quite a few cases have been mentioned, but something else that is frightening is how civilians or ordinary people are governed by laws that say pedophilia, child trafficking, and murder are wrong, yet the Jeffrey Epstein affair suggests a select group, the establishment or the privileged, may operate under different rules. Some people have speculated that Epstein was killed because of what he knew and by people he could have exposed. His death was ruled a suicide, but doubts remain. There has also been concern about Virginia Giuffre and other alleged victims. Some question the circumstances surrounding their experiences and subsequent events. Reports name a member of the House of Lords and former prominent member of the United Kingdom government, a member of the royal family, a current and a former president of the United States, and possibly many more as being implicated in allegations of crimes against women and children. Worse, the institutions that are supposed to protect us and enforce the law appear to be involved in the opposite. The mechanisms that suppressed information may now be working to release enough truth to placate the public, but not the whole truth. Perhaps we are distracted by partisan or salacious stories, but imagine how terrifying it would be if you knew too much. I encourage people to look into the death of Dr. David Kelly and the death of Robin Cook, Member of Parliament, especially the former. Some people view these cases as examples of how the state deals with people who cause problems or know too much. Story 148. Random sucker punches by strangers in public have been on the rise. Story 149. EX0. Honestly, nothing scares me more. When it comes online, I believe it will literally be the start of the last countdown. Story 150. Parallel sequestered existences paired with information control and artificially generated improvisation. Story 151. I admit it. I am worried about climate change. Nobody around me is losing sleep over it. Story 152. We cannot even agree on what is factual and what is true. If we cannot align behind what is real, we will never heal this massive rift. Story 153. As the environment loses support and small creatures die, toxicity will increase in our world. That will create more toxins for humans, since we can only evolve up to a point, unlike dinosaurs and other species. We will then have shorter lifespans before becoming extinct. The world may then start over from bacteria and create new life. Fewer people want to have children these days, and that is okay. I have accepted this, so enjoy our current lives now. We will not be here forever. I have accepted that our children's lives will be very different in 10 to 20 years, just as life was different for our aging parents when they started out. My only hope is that my children and their children will not be the last humans before the world completely falters. Story 154. Fascism and authoritarianism are rising like never before. Worse, it is not some pocket group in the world supporting the rise. Globally, countries must battle large swaths of their populations who support religious authoritarianism. In the United States, even center-right people are supporting Christian nationalism and authoritarian regimes. My parents were hippies in the 1970s, and most of their friends growing up were strongly feminist, liberal, and left-leaning. There were a few times when they went crazy. For example, they thought all video games were murder simulators after a 60 Minutes report on Doom 2 in the 1990s. Most of their friends are right-wing authoritarians now. I mean, they support life sentences for first offenses involving drugs and compulsory church on Sundays for everyone. They want blue laws so everything is closed on Sundays, while simultaneously saying that the government should not tell me I cannot go out and buy a machine gun because the bad guys have them. We are very close to having a full-on Christian nationalist authoritarian regime running the United States and several other countries, and the average person in almost every rural state I have visited in the last 10 years is applauding it. Story 155. I met the love of my life 2 years ago. We have been in a long-distance relationship for the past year. I am worried we will not see the end of the relationship given how countries are making immigration harder. Story 156. The Nazis have the largest military in the world and possess nuclear weapons. Story 157. Portrayal of assault by women as excused and normalized in the media. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.